Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of PLA with myself, Nick, and Bruno. We've got two questions today, one from Facebook from Mark, and the second one from an agent. We'll do the first question with yourself, Nick, and then tackle the second one with yourself, Bruno. The first question, Nick, goes as follows from Mark. Mark asks, who can I turn to if a neighbor wants to claim an alley, which I thought was mine, and I've been using it for 22 years now? Mark is in Cape Town and needs to find out what happened during some subdivision some decades ago. The houses are at least 90 years old, and he is asking whether is the surveyor general the right channel? Does he have any rights after so many years? And if he does lose the alley, who will be obliged to build a new boundary wall? Nick?
Okay, perfect. So you were sort of on the right track. So when we have disputes with regards to boundary walls, okay, or rights of use on a particular piece of land, okay, the right person to go to in this particular circumstance is what's called a land surveyor. Okay, now what a land surveyor is going to do is they're going to be able to pull up the SU diagrams for your particular properties that are sitting next to each other, and they're going to be able to find out exactly where the boundary lines of your particular properties lie. Okay, they're going to be able to determine that with exactness. Okay, and what they also do in that process is they will generally also have a look at the title deeds of the extensive title deeds of the property to determine whether there are any registered rights against that particular property. So we're talking about Cape Town. Cape Town is an interesting place, especially with your older buildings, because it's packed very close to one another, and in lots of cases, you'll have buildings that are sitting behind one another, and there is some sort of right which is given to the buildings that lie maybe behind the buildings that are on a street level. Okay, and this is what's referred to as a servitude. Okay, now a servitude or a right to use a particular property, which does sound like it's a possibility. There's an alleyway, you've been using it for a long time. It obviously gives some sort of access to your property. Um, it might be a registered servitude. Now, the trick with the servitude is it must be registered against the title deed. So on the title deed, there's going to be a specific provision that says this piece of land, and it's going to set out exactly where that is perhaps a servitude that is a right of way for any of the houses behind. Now, all of this information is going to be on the title deed, and it is something that the land surveyor is going to use when they mark out the property. So they are the right person to talk to. They will assist you, and often when we get these disputes between neighbors, because these things become very very difficult quite fast. um we always urge our clients, just keep a cool head. Try, talk to your neighbor, get an agreement that you're going to get a land surveyor in, chosen by one of you or chosen by both of you, someone who's objective that can come in and give an actual recount. Or if that fails, I've done circumstances where I get my client to get a land surveyor, they get their client to get a land surveyor, and they together make a determination. It's a little bit more costly because everyone's paying for their own people, but sometimes disputes, that's how they got to be resolved, and you find the resolve to this particular thing. And that will give you an idea of where exactly your boundary wall lies, whether there's going to be a servitude there. I'm afraid, in respect of your question about, you've been using it for a period of 22 years, is there any possibility for you to now retain it in any way? If the servitude's not registered to the property, I'm afraid it might be quite difficult. This is not a section of land which perhaps you've been residing on historically. It seems to me just to be a pathway. And so it's going to be very difficult for you to claim a right of a pathway. But it really depends on what comes up from the title deed. And then in respect of your last question, we say, well, who's now obliged to build a boundary wall? Well, that number one, I don't think anyone's obliged to build a boundary wall. We're, in South Africa, we build boundary walls just because that's sort of the way we function. But there's no obligation on anyone to build a boundary wall. But the deeper question is, well, can a wall be built, and where will that wall be built? So if there is a registered servitude, which might be the case in this circumstance, even if the land did belong to your neighbor, okay, but that servitude is there, you have the ability to use that servitude. So when law students are going through law school, we do a plethora of cases where, for instance, there is a servitude, but the owner of the property decides to put a gate in front of that servitude, and the arguments is always, well, you can still use it, you just have to go through my gate, and you might or might not have the key to that particular gate. There's very historic case law to say that's not that's not allowed. You can't hamper the ability to use that particular servitude by blocking it or something else. So really, land surveyor first, take it step by step, find out exactly what the status is on those particular properties. And then if there is a question of, well, we need to build a boundary wall, that can be addressed at that point once you know exactly where everything lies.
And it's interesting. So I know you touched on it, but I've got now personal experience because of the current situation with my house. And part of the conversation there was council is actually obligated because of we pay our rates, and a property within the South African context has to have some kind of access point, and that's according to the town planning regulations and the policies and everything like that. So in my instance now, where access to my property is no longer possible through from the street, in situations like that, it is justifiable to say, so for example, if this alleyway was actually the main pathway, it is actually justifiable to make a case to say that this has to be registered as servitude. It is the only way that you can get onto the property, or council needs to make another plan. So maybe not this neighbor. And our government actually has the authorities, like through the expropriation, basically the expropriation laws, they've got the authority to say, sorry, we're going to register servitude. So they won't necessarily take the piece of land away from the neighbor. They won't change ownership over it or extend the lines. They will just enforce the registration of the servitude and put it on the title deed.
Yeah. So thank you very much, gentlemen. We do have quite a number of videos up on our channel regarding boundary walls and servitude. So Mark, please do go back, search it, and do have a couple of watches.